In the late 1500s, the heart of West Central Africa pulsed with power and promise. Beyond the thick rainforests and wide rivers of modern-day Angola lay the kingdom of Ndongo, a land rich in copper, ivory, and spirit. Its people, the Mbundu, were farmers, warriors, and traders who lived by the rhythm of the land and the wisdom of their ancestors. But as the sun set on the 16th century, dark sails began to appear on the horizon, Portuguese ships, heavy with guns and greed. In 1583, under the rule of King Gola Kiluanja Kiasamba, a daughter was born into the royal family of Ndongo. She was named Nzinga Mbande. According to legend, Nzinga entered the world with the umbilical cord wrapped around her neck, a sign, elders said, of power and destiny. She would be a leader, they whispered, a child born to rule, born to fight. Her father, King Gola, ruled a proud people who were already feeling the pressure of foreign expansion. The Portuguese, having settled along the coast at Luanda, were demanding slaves and tribute in exchange for weapons and goods. The kingdom resisted, but tension grew, and soon war followed. From a young age, Nzinga was different. While other girls learned the songs of the women, Nzinga learned the art of negotiation, the language of diplomacy, and the tactics of war. Her father allowed her to attend councils of war, a rare honor. She listened, learned, and spoke with such clarity that even seasoned generals nodded in respect. Nzinga learned to ride horses, throw spears, and command soldiers, but also to read the heart of an enemy. Her sharp intelligence became her greatest weapon. In those early years, she watched as Portuguese slave traders captured thousands of Africans, selling them across the Atlantic. The once mighty Ndongo kingdom began to crumble under the weight of betrayal and war. And Nzinga learned a painful truth. If her people were to survive, she would have to think like a queen and fight like a warrior. It was now the year 1622. The Portuguese governor of Luanda, João Correia de Sousa, sent word that he wanted peace talks with Ndongo. By then, Nzinga's brother, Ngola Mbande, was king, and he trusted her as his envoy, the only person clever enough to face the Europeans on equal ground. So Nzinga set out for Luanda, accompanied by her royal guards and advisors. When she entered the hall of the Portuguese governor, she found that no chair had been placed for her, only a carpet on the floor. To sit, she would have to kneel before the governor, symbolically lowering herself as a subject of Portugal. But Nzinga saw through the insult. Without a word, she turned to one of her attendants. The loyal servant knelt, and Nzinga sat gracefully upon his back, looking the governor square in the eyes. The hall fell silent. With that single gesture, she made a statement that would echo through history. "I kneel before no man." The meeting lasted hours. Nzinga spoke with calm authority, in fluent Portuguese. She demanded that the Portuguese stop enslaving her people and withdraw from Ndongo lands. She promised fair trade and peace, but only as equals. Governor de Sousa, impressed by her intellect and poise, agreed to a temporary peace. As part of the diplomacy, Nzinga accepted baptism, taking the Christian name Ana de Sousa after the governor's wife. Many saw it as submission, but Nzinga knew better. Her conversion was a mask, a diplomatic move to win favor, to buy time. The peace would not last. Within a few years, the Portuguese broke their promises. They continued their raids, capturing villages and selling her people into slavery. Nzinga's brother, the king, despaired and took his own life in 1626. The court was thrown into chaos. The Portuguese moved to install a puppet ruler. But Nzinga, now in her early 40s, stepped forward. She gathered her loyalists and declared herself Queen of Ndongo. In her first decree, she vowed, "No foreign power shall rule this land while I live." But the odds were against her. The Portuguese had guns, ships, and alliances with brutal African mercenaries known as Mbangala. Nzinga was forced to flee west with her followers, pursued through forests and rivers. Yet even in exile, she refused to surrender. In the remote region of Matamba, Nzinga rebuilt her base of power. There, she welcomed refugees, escaped slaves, and warriors who refused to bow to colonial rule. She forged a new army, disciplined, loyal, and fearless. In the dense jungles and hidden valleys, she created what would become the Kingdom of Matamba, a beacon of African resistance. Nzinga reorganized her forces, trained both men and women in combat, and used intelligence networks to spy on her enemies. She was not just a queen, she was a commander, a strategist, and a symbol of defiance. As the drums of war echoed once again across Angola, Nzinga looked out over her campfires. The glow of the flames reflected in her eyes. The world would soon learn that Queen Nzinga was no ordinary ruler. She would challenge an empire that spanned oceans, and she would make them bleed. In the wild, forested lands of Matamba, the exiled queen began to rebuild her throne. They had taken her home, her people, her peace, but they would never take her spirit. This was no longer just a fight for land. It was a fight for freedom. And Queen Nzinga would show the world what an African queen could do. In her new capital of Matamba, Nzinga wasted no time. She gathered chiefs, generals, and elders, and spoke to them beneath the open sky. Her voice carried like thunder through the trees. They think we are weak because we are women, because we are Africans. But it is the roots that hold the tree upright, not the branches. And we are the roots of this land. Under her rule, Matamba became a fortress of hope. Escaped slaves, warriors, and displaced villagers found refuge within her borders. She turned refugees into soldiers, and despair into discipline. She also built alliances, marrying diplomacy with strategy. She reached out to neighboring kingdoms, trading goods for weapons, and using her intelligence network to outthink the Portuguese at every turn. Nzinga trained her army in both traditional Mbundu combat and guerrilla warfare. Her warriors learned to strike swiftly, to vanish into the jungle and reappear like shadows. Many accounts describe her leading her troops personally into battle, riding a horse or carried on the shoulders of her guards, dressed in war paint and feathers, wielding twin spears. When the Portuguese marched on Matamba, they expected an easy victory. But Nzinga turned the terrain itself into a weapon. She used rivers, traps, and ambushes to destroy entire columns of enemy troops. The Portuguese learned to fear the whisper of her name. Rainha Nzinga, the Queen of the Bush. To survive the relentless assaults, Nzinga made a bold and controversial move. She allied herself with the Mbangala, fierce nomadic warriors feared for their brutality. It was a pact born of necessity, not trust. The Mbangala helped her reclaim lost territories, raid Portuguese outposts, and rescue her captured subjects. But the alliance came at a moral price. Their customs were harsh, their methods ruthless. Nzinga, ever the strategist, used the Mbangala strength but kept her vision pure: liberation. In one famous battle near the Kwanza River, her forces ambushed a Portuguese convoy, freeing hundreds of captives. Each victory restored not just her power, but her people's faith. By the late 1630s, Queen Nzinga was no longer a fugitive. She was a ruler of two kingdoms, Ndongo and Matamba. She re-established trade with the Dutch, who had recently displaced the Portuguese along parts of the Angolan coast. The Dutch supplied her with guns, ammunition, and support in exchange for trade alliances. Nzinga saw in them not saviors, but opportunity. When the Dutch and Portuguese clashed in Luanda, she joined the fight, hoping to drive the colonizers out for good. Her troops fought bravely alongside the Dutch in 1647, defeating the Portuguese in several major battles. For a moment, it seemed victory was near. But the tides of empire are never kind. The Dutch withdrew, and the Portuguese returned, stronger and vengeful. The next decades were a struggle of endurance. The Portuguese waged economic and psychological warfare, cutting off her trade routes and spreading lies about her rule. But Nzinga refused to yield. She sent envoys across Central Africa, calling for unity among African kingdoms. She told her people, "If we stand divided, we fall as slaves. But if we stand together, we shall be free." Even in her 70s, she led councils, organized defenses, and strengthened the kingdom's governance. She built schools, welcomed Christian missionaries, but always on her terms. She said, "The white man's God may live in the church, but the spirit of our ancestors lives in every tree, every river, every woman and man who stands free." By the 1650s, Queen Nzinga had become more than a monarch. She was a myth, a symbol of resistance across Africa. Traders and travelers spoke her name in whispers and songs. The queen who never kneels. The woman who fought the empire. Even Portuguese chroniclers, though they called her the Amazon of Africa, could not hide their respect for her brilliance. Nzinga had fought for over 4 decades, outwitting governors, kings, and generals. She built alliances, defended her people, and proved that African women were not mere queens of beauty, but queens of power. As the sun sets over Matamba, the aging queen sits upon her throne, carved from dark wood and gold. Around her, the kingdom hums with life: markets, warriors, children born free. Her eyes, still sharp, gaze toward the west, toward the land once lost, and the ocean that carried away so many of her people. For 40 years, she defied the tide of empire. Her body aged, but her fire never dimmed. She was Queen Nzinga, the unbroken spirit of Angola. Time had carved lines on her face, but not on her spirit. The woman who once rode into battle with a spear now ruled with the wisdom of a queen and the heart of a mother. This is the final chapter of Queen Nzinga of Ndongo and Matamba, the woman who fought an empire and built a legacy that still burns today. By the 1650s, Queen Nzinga was in her 60s, an age few leaders of her time reached, especially one forged in endless war. But she was not yet done. Nzinga turned her focus from the battlefield to nation building. She worked tirelessly to restore peace in her lands. Villages were rebuilt, farms recultivated, and trade resumed. She encouraged women to take leadership roles, and her army became one of the most disciplined in Central Africa. And though her relationship with the Portuguese had once been soaked in blood, Nzinga now chose diplomacy, but without submission. She sent envoys to Luanda, not to beg, but to negotiate, as equals. Her message was clear. We may trade words and goods, but not our freedom. Years of fighting had exhausted both sides. The Portuguese knew that despite their guns, they could not fully conquer Matamba. So in 1656, they signed a peace treaty with Queen Nzinga, recognizing her rule and promising mutual trade. It was more than ink on paper. It was the recognition of an African queen's power in a world ruled by empires. Nzinga used this peace to strengthen her people, reforming the army, promoting education, and rebuilding her capital city. For the first time in decades, her lands knew a fragile peace. Nzinga's diplomacy wasn't just military, it was spiritual. She had once used Catholicism as a political tool, converting to Christianity during earlier peace talks. Now, in her later years, she re-embraced it publicly, while still honoring traditional Mbundu spirituality. She attended church services but also presided over ancestral rituals. She understood what few could, that to lead her people, she must honor both the cross and the calabash. We are children of two worlds, she said, but our soul belongs to the land of our ancestors. Nzinga even invited missionaries to teach literacy and trade, yet she made sure her people never forgot their roots. But time, the one enemy she could not outfight, began to catch up with her. Her generals aged, her warriors settled into family life, and whispers grew in her court. What will happen when the queen is gone? She knew that legacy mattered more than power. Nzinga began to train her sister, Kambu, to lead after her. She built councils to ensure order would remain after her passing. To her people, she was not just a ruler, she was the mother of the nation. In December 1663, the great Queen Nzinga breathed her last breath. She was in her 80s, an extraordinary age for a warrior who had lived through wars, betrayals, and victories. They say the drums of Matamba beat for 7 days, and women across Angola wailed songs of mourning. Her warriors, hardened by battle, wept openly, not for her death, but for what she represented. Freedom, dignity, defiance. They buried her in royal regalia, wrapped in the colors of her kingdom, red for courage, gold for strength, black for her people. Her throne was left empty for weeks. No one dared sit upon it. Centuries later, Queen Nzinga remains a symbol, not just for Angola, but for all of Africa. She fought European colonizers long before the age of resistance began. She proved that African women could lead armies, outthink generals, and govern nations with brilliance and grace. Today, in Luanda, a towering statue stands in her honor. Streets, schools, and universities bear her name. Every year, Angolans remember her as the mother of the nation. Her story has inspired books, songs, and films, and her spirit continues to whisper to every woman who dares to lead, every nation that dares to rise. The chains of yesterday are broken by the courage of today. Queen Nzinga's story echoes far beyond Angola. She reminds us that leadership is not born from conquest, but from conviction. That power is not given, it is earned through sacrifice and vision. As Africa continues to rise, her legacy stands as a call to reclaim our history, our dignity, and our future. Nzinga fought with a spear, we fight with our voices, but the war for freedom never truly ends. Centuries have passed since the reign of Queen Nzinga Mbande of Ndongo and Matamba. Yet her story refuses to fade. Her courage was more than defiance, it was a prophecy that one day, Africa would rise again. In the land she once ruled, her name is spoken with reverence. To the Angolan people, she is Rainha Nzinga, the mother of resistance, the warrior queen who dared to fight the impossible fight. But her legacy doesn't stop at Angola's borders. From Ghana to Haiti, from Brazil to the Caribbean, Nzinga's spirit traveled across oceans, carried in the hearts of those who refused to be broken. She fought with the sword, the people say, but her true weapon was her mind. Across the world, scholars and storytellers have rediscovered her name. For centuries, European history books painted Africa as a land without heroes. But Nzinga's story shattered that myth. Her face now appears in documentaries, school textbooks, murals, and even in Afrofuturist art, representing the fierce intelligence of African womanhood. In the United States, during the Civil Rights Movement, black activists drew inspiration from her. They called her the African Amazon, a symbol of power and defiance. In Brazil, descendants of enslaved Africans honored Nzinga in candle rituals, seeing her as a warrior spirit who fights for justice. In Cuba, her name is sung in Afro-Cuban spiritual songs, a reminder that no matter how far the Atlantic carried Africa's children, the spirit of freedom followed. Modern historians now see Queen Nzinga as more than a warrior. She was a diplomat, feminist, and visionary far ahead of her time. She negotiated peace treaties, outsmarted European generals, and built alliances when survival seemed impossible. Her letters to the Portuguese crown, written in eloquent Portuguese, still exist today, revealing a mind sharp as a blade and a heart unyielding. She spoke the language of her enemies, but never surrendered her soul. They understood her words, one historian wrote, but never her spirit. Nzinga's life carries lessons that still matter in 21st century Africa. On leadership, she showed that true power lies not in domination, but in protection, protecting one's people, culture, and dignity. On unity, she understood that division was the colonizers' greatest weapon. Her alliances with neighboring kingdoms saved her nation. On identity, she proved that African women could be strategists, rulers, and warriors, centuries before feminism became a global movement. In today's Africa, from politics to business, from music to activism, Nzinga's spirit lives on in every woman who rises, every leader who refuses to bow. In Luanda, Angola's capital, a majestic statue of Queen Nzinga now stands tall, spear in hand, eyes gazing toward the horizon. It's more than bronze. It's memory. It's a nation's way of saying, we remember. We are because she was. Every November 17th, Angola celebrates Queen Nzinga Day, honoring her courage and her contribution to the birth of a nation. In schools, children learn her story not as a tale of the past, but as a lesson for the future. She is the embodiment of resilience, diplomacy, and African pride. In the digital age, Nzinga has become a Pan-African icon. Artists paint her image with crowns of gold and armor of fire. Filmmakers and YouTubers across Africa tell her story as a symbol of resistance. In Afrobeat music videos, she appears as the ultimate queen, the archetype of strength and grace. In Hollywood, her story has been discussed as one worthy of global cinema, the African Braveheart. And in classrooms across the diaspora, Nzinga stands alongside Harriet Tubman, Yera Santawa, and Cleopatra as one of history's most powerful women. Nzinga is not just a person, one modern writer said. She is a movement, the voice of every woman who refuses to kneel. Nzinga's struggle mirrors the fight of today's Africa, against poverty, exploitation, and the lingering scars of colonization. Just as she fought the Portuguese invaders, today's Africans fight for economic freedom, cultural independence, and global respect. Her words echo through time. They may take our gold, but never our pride. From young African entrepreneurs to women in leadership, from protests for justice to movements for unity, Nzinga's fire still burns. She represents the power of the African spirit, unyielding, creative, and divine. In the final pages of her life, Nzinga wrote a prayer, not for herself, but for her people. She asked the ancestors to bless Matamba, to protect the land, and to keep her people free. Today, that prayer still hangs in the air, not just in Angola, but across Africa. Every time an African girl dreams of leadership, every time a people rise against oppression, every time Africa stands tall, Nzinga smiles. The woman who fought an empire did not die. She became Africa itself. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more inspiring African history stories.